And I got my noodles, and we are live. What's up, Peter Baird? How are you?
Hey, no, not bad.
Oh, well, that sounded demoralizing, but all right. Dealing with the cold weather, guys. It's winter down here in good old Brazil. All right.
Yeah, it's not that cold though, but it's also July, mid-month business,
Mm,
mid-year business slump.
It'll get a little bit colder before it's all through. But yeah, it has been better the last week or so because last week was rough.
Last
Uh,
week was freezing.
but you still feel it. Like it's colder in my house than outside my house. Like the houses here retain whatever the temperatures outside by like double. At least mine does. When it's hot outside,
Yeah, it
my
can.
house is twice as hot. When it's cold outside, my house is twice as cold. So sometimes I leave the house like looking like I'm about to go into an igloo type situation, and then it's not that cold outside. I'm like, fuck. And then it'll happen in the reverse. Like I'll leave my house thinking it's super, super, super hot, and then I'll like, oh shit, I should have brought a light jacket because my house just doesn't register temperature well. But it is what it is. Good time. Just sit back and watch a lot of X Files. Season 4 was a little bit rough for me. It took me a little bit longer to watch it. I was actually sometimes, just finishing the last episode that I needed to watch to do the podcast. But man, season 5 and 6, I've been really entertained with. Like I'm almost done season 6. So if we aren't on any Thursday, it's just because life, just put it down. But we try to be on every Thursday, guys. Thank you for watching. Those of you that do, we got our loyal fan base, as I always like to say, and our steady viewership. And it's really awesome that you guys hang out with us for an hour or more sometimes. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the page and watch yourself some X Files. At the end of season 5, we'll be talking about the movie, so go rewatch that movie, and we'll have a fun time with that. Anyway, Pete, episodes 6 through 10 of the X Files are quite an interesting bunch. We have Christmas Carol, and then we got Emily, and then we got Kitsunagari, and Schizo Jenny, and Chinga. So we will begin with Christmas Carol, and I'll let you begin with this one. It was, it's episode 6 here, and it was released on December 7th, 1997, so around Christmas time, and viewed by 20.9 million people. And it's supposed to take place from December 21st to 25th, 1997. Now that I figured out what that dates thing means on the wiki page, that's actually kind of cool little feature. Written by Vince Gilligan, John Shaban, and Frank Sputniks, and directed by Peter Markle. 7.9 rating on IMDb. While Scully and her mother stay with Dana's brother and his pregnant wife at Christmas Eve, Scully receives several weird phone calls that she thinks might be from her deceased sister. She also becomes involved in an investigation of a woman's alleged suicide, believing that the victim was actually murdered, and learns that the departed woman's young adopted daughter is apparently her own offspring. Good lord, a whole lot of meat there. What do you think of this one, P?
This whole two-part story I wasn't crazy about. It kind of felt like what it was, which was something that they kind of pulled out of their butts at the last minute. Because what was happening here is David Duchovny was in a pretty good thriller movie, actually, with Timothy Hutton called Playing God. And he plays like a disgraced doctor who's he's hired by this gangster to be like the personal surgeon for his crew. So they had to do an episode without Duchovny because he was doing this movie. So they tried to come up with a Scully centered episode, and apparently they rejected a bunch of ideas. That's why it's called A Christmas Carol, because I think Gillian Anderson suggested the concept of like her just like being visited for people from by people from her past. And this is what they came up with, and that's what it feels like we were thinking of something, and this is the best we could do. So yeah, it's set over Christmas. She's spending Christmas with her family, which includes her asshole brother. And she gets a phone call that appears to be from her sister. And she traces the number to the home of this woman who has apparently committed suicide. She's convinced that the woman has been murdered, and she's also convinced that the husband did it. And in the aftermath, she kind of develops a relationship with the woman's daughter, Emily. And as she starts to make this Emily Melissa connection, she thinks the reason her sister is calling her, because she finds out Emily is adopted, is because this must actually be Melissa's daughter. And her family, being good Catholic people, they're shocked by this. They're outraged. They're like, no, Melissa strayed from the path, but she was a good Catholic. She wouldn't have a baby and give it up for adoption and not tell us. You've been spending too much time around that Mulder guy. They're not even wanting to hear it. But as Scully's investigation progresses, it does actually start to look like she was killed, but not by her husband. Eventually, the big twist, which Phil kind of already talked about, is Bill, her brother, shows her a picture of Melissa just before Emily was born, and she is clearly not pregnant. Scully is still convinced. She gets a DNA test, and the episode ends with, "She's my daughter," which now makes this a mythology episode because we know that Scully was kidnapped and she had her ovum taken. So how would this happen? We know how this could have happened. It's not even a mystery. But the big shock is that now there is a child as a result of this. But yeah, that's the summary. My overall thoughts on the episode were it felt like something they pulled out their asses.
I hope people couldn't hear me eating like I'm fucking
monster.
Seriously, I'm
sorry. I have my headphones on.
I tried to mute it, but then I couldn't mute it. So my computer's acting weird. I was hungry, guys, and I'm eating some really good noodles. Anyhow, I'm with you. Like, first off, this is one of those weird episodes because it's a two-parter, huge mythology episode that I could not remember for the life of me. I don't remember watching it first run. I don't remember anything from it from when I did the rewatch a couple years back. And so I was genuinely just kind of following along, like, where is this going? William thing, because it's so fucking depressing. Like, I think it's one of the worst character arcs for Scully is her in her depressive mom state. Like, they can't give this woman a happy ending, including the finale of the show. I mean, if Gillian Anderson ever comes back, we are left with that last episode of season 11, and it's like, fuck, they can't give this woman a happy ending. It's a tough one to get through. I did like the beginning though. It did grab me in the beginning. Big Christmas one. But it hooked me with the whole thing with Scully hearing her call her from the dead. Because
Okay, well, Phil, actually, it seems like Phil's had the connection problem here and not me, which is a first. Because, yes, last week I left the broadcast rather abruptly. because my internet went down for 4 days, starting with the podcast. That was the beginning of a 4-day program. So let me just tell you some other interesting things about this as we wait for Phil to get back on. Apparently, Gillian Anderson was also not available for shooting for all of this. So her actual real life sister played her in the present opening scene where she's opening presents with her family. So that was kind of cool. I agree with what Phil says that these Scully as a mother arcs are actually incredibly depressing. This one, I think the second part is actually, well, I don't think it is infinitely more depressing. But it was also a better episode, I think, just because they had a little more time to jump into it. Didn't feel too rushed. But from an overall storytelling perspective, I really question the point of this. Like, what is the point of putting Scully through this experience in terms of the greater story? Especially since they kind of revisited this later. Here, I mean, this story, as Phil mentioned, he didn't remember it. And it's just kind of like this forgettable story that also happens to be really sad and put Scully through a lot of emotional trauma. So, yeah, that's why I wasn't too crazy about this one in particular. All right. We will be talking about the same arc. We are going to wait for Phil to get back on. He's probably restarting his computer. But I'm going to go into the next episode because it's part of the same arc. So Phil can come back and share his thoughts on both parts, the story as a whole. Part 2, Emily. So Scully has found out that this poor girl, Emily, is her daughter. We got Mulder in this episode, and they start doing some research into how this girl came to be, and there aren't any real records. The mother her biological mother that she was adopted from, her name is Anna Fugazi, which anyone who knows gangster movies knows is slang for fake. There's no real records. Scully, whose desire to be a mother has been hinted at throughout the series, she's actually decided to take it upon herself that she wants to adopt this girl because I believe actually her biological father gets killed by Men in Black. I don't remember that detail because it's been a couple months. But Scully actually wants to be a mom. Unfortunately, little Emily is not doing so good. Little Emily is basically on death's doorstep. She comes down with a fever. They try and do some surgery on her. She's got like this gross green cyst in the back of her neck, and she like squirts green liquid that makes everyone sick. So yeah, it looks like Emily is not long for this world. So basically what they come to conclude here is that Emily is a failed result of an experiment to produce human alien hybrids, and Scully was also part of that experiment, and she failed, and she's gonna die, and she does. And that's what I think Phil was talking about, the really depressing part. You go through all of this and you do kind of feel Scully's desire to be a mother, and she kind of buys into it almost to the point where she seems willing to give up her career in the FBI, and it's all for nothing. The kid dies, we're all left depressed, Scully's left depressed, and then this entire 2-episode story arc is pretty much completely forgotten by both the audience and the writers. So yeah, it feels like what it is, something they did just to fill a couple episodes time and left people with some negative feelings and was never spoken of again. So Phil, I hear you're back. I see you lost your connection there for a bit, but I just jumped ahead to the next episode and figure you could sum up both at the same time.
That's what I'm talking about, man. Perfect. That's why Pete's my co-host. He knows how to just do shit. Uh, yeah. I've been having bad internet all day. Surprise, surprise. And it's funny, Pete, because it's right when I need it. Like I was bullshitting watching adult movies, let's say, watching YouTube videos, listening to podcasts, doing everything this afternoon. And then as soon as I needed to start my class at 7, the internet dies. And then I went back to doing bullshit until it was time for our podcast. And then it just goes off, and it's frustrating because on the computer it says you are online, but obviously I'm not. Anyway, Pete, I like what I got the tail end of that, and you encapsulated everything that I was gonna get to, which is that's why it's fucking depressing, and it's horrible how they do that to Gillian Anderson. And I can understand her frustration if it's true, because you never know what's rumor and what isn't, with how the writers treat her character sometimes, and it's like, man, just give this woman um, a win, when it comes to her personal life, because it just take, and rape. She's raped by aliens, raped by the cigarette smoking man, raped by everybody, raped by the government. So I get that, and I get women's frustrations with her character. Um, just some random notes here. Slowly, Scully is opening up to the possibility of the paranormal. That part I did like, as far as character development. Um, uh, Mulder for a cheesy. Oh, Mulder's in there for a second in a cheesy running hat, but then Pete explained why that was. So, and then I just said, "What a depressing Christmas," and it just
Yeah,
what depressing, and everything's so dark in Scully's household. Like these people can't afford like some lamps or something. Um, and then we got this one little connection that I made is that the last episode had Jerry Springer. This one had more of a Maury Povich line here, like "You are the father," but here it's "You are the mother." So I didn't see the ending coming. So I'll give it credit for that. It was like, okay, they tried at least to not just give us a what did they used to do back in the day, Pete? Remember they used to do those what do they call them? The episodes where it's just clip episodes, At least they
oh
did
yeah,
a little bit.
flashback episodes. Yeah,
Yeah, and then you just show clips from, Star Trek: The Next Generation has a really, really famous one like that. So bad.
yeah.
Um,
90210 did a few of those. Man, they were painful.
oh, of course. It's like somebody fell and now they have, to get their memory back. It's like, didn't you remember? And then it's the clips from, season 1. Anyway, and then for episode 7, Emily, I did think it was cute to see Mulder and Scully in parent moment because, eventually they do get together. And then I wrote, I don't remember any of this shit. And I really don't. And that's exactly what Pete said. At the end of it, it means nothing to the mythology. And it's forgotten by the characters and forgotten by us, which is basically what it felt like. Um, but I mean, kind of cool. At least, like, I just give it this much credit that at least they tried to do something. Like they threw it together, but at least they tried to do something. Like, okay, it did kind of shock me, and it was kind of cool to see that the girl was an alien hybrid killer. That was kind of cool. Um, and I did like that juxtaposition between one child dead, but the other one born, because throughout the whole episode, Scully's sister-in-law is
Right.
pregnant. So that was a nice little touch. The music, Mark Snow, the MVP on nearly every episode. He fucks up every once in a while, but really great music, like very Danny Elfman vibes at the funeral. I really like that scene. So I gave it 3.5 stars. Poor Scully. It was watchable. It was like the worst episode, but definitely not something that I would ever go back to watch. Which brings me to something, Pete, that we forgot to do at the start. Because last week, Pete is the one that had all the internet issues, and he got cut
Yeah,
out.
I
At the
was
end,
telling people that was the beginning of like 4 days with basically no internet. It started then and it didn't come back until like Monday afternoon.
good Lord, and these people are calling me every day asking me if I want to up my internet, and I'm like, eh. But anyway, real quick, Redux, skip or watch?
Well, let's do the skipper watch for episodes 1 to 10
You
for
want to do
the
that at
end
the
of the
end?
podcast. Yeah,
All right, we'll do
yeah,
it.
we'll just go
It'll be a
episodes
mega.
1 to 10.
It's gonna be a mega skipper watch, y'all. Coming at
Yeah,
the end. And these go by real quick because we're only doing 5 episodes because this is only a 20-episode season. So we'll get through these pretty quickly tonight. So there's Christmas Carol, and then there's Emily, and there's Smolders. Funny face there. But then we get to the good stuff. All
oh
right.
yeah,
We got Kitsunegari. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that
yes,
right.
I believe that
And
is correct.
it is an episode from January 4th, 1998, viewed by 19.75 million people, written by Vince Gilligan and Tim Minyar, and directed by Daniel Sackheim. So Vince is really taking like major writing roles here. And
Yeah, and this is an episode you would expect that he would write though, because this is a sequel, I think, to his first episode.
yes, yes. When an influential former killer, that's a funny way to put it, who was arrested by Mulder and Scully escapes, the agents search for him but discover that he is not their only concern. Now, that's a much better synopsis. They're not giving everything away. I forgot who it is. Is it? I think it's back to you because I started.
Well, no, you didn't. I started, and then
Oh, yeah,
I
you
did the
started?
second episode as well because you were off the air. So you should probably.
No, but go ahead. Go ahead. Because I know you love Pusher. You love this guy.
I know. I felt really bad too that I completely neglected the Pusher episode when I was doing like my best of the season recap. You're like, what about Pusher? It's like, oh shit, yeah. It's like one of the best. So yeah, this is the sequel to the Pusher. And our buddy Robert Patrick Modell, he is in prison where he's still got his brain tumor and he's recovering from a brain injury. And people take his shit very seriously. Like, this guy's got a rep. Even people who are like skeptical about the paranormal are like, we don't know how he does it, but this dude is fucking dangerous. So it starts with him in prison, and he gets to talking to a guard, and he escapes. And the only thing the guard has to say is he had to go. So very cryptic. Mulder's on the case immediately because in Pusher it kind of seemed like Modell saw himself as Joker to Fox's Batman. Almost, he was looking for a worthy adversary to go out in a blaze of glory. So naturally, you think the guy's going to come after Mulder, but things turn out a little differently. As they track the guy, he's killing other people that are associated with him, including I believe, what was it, the prosecutor or the judge at his trial? I think it was the prosecutor.
Mm-hmm.
Who is killed drowned in cerulean blue paint. That was a great reference because in the original Pusher episode, he hypnotizes a cop by getting him to focus on the color blue using the term cerulean blue. Cerulean blue. So yes, it was the prosecutor. And at the scene of the crime, they find the title Kitsunegari written on the wall, which means fox hunt. So obviously, this is taken to mean that he's coming for Mulder. But Mulder is pretty confused because this isn't what he does. Like, what Modell was about, he was basically like a small man who had this power that he used to live out his fantasies as like some kind of Ronin. And he thinks like this is just a little beneath him. And as they start to investigate, they start to focus on the prosecutor's wife, who just she doesn't actually she's making bad puns. She makes some really bad puns about her husband's murder. I can't remember what it is, but he sees like the same kind of ego in her that he saw in Modell. And basically, what it boils down to is that she is Modell's long lost twin sister.
Mm.
And they have the same powers, and she's using them not so much to get revenge for her brother, but just to use that as a platform for the same kind of ego complex that her brother has. So it was good because number one, I love the original episode, and it brought back one of the few X Files villains to bring back a monster of the week. But in this case, unlike the Tombs episode, it wasn't like Return of the Monster. It was like, okay, the monster's back, but that's actually not the focus of the episode. There's like a whole other bad guy here to focus on. And it does end very similarly to how Pusher ended, with everybody going crazy. She, just like her brother, she damn near gets them, but the voice of reason prevails.
Yes, and thank God it was Mulder holding the gun because Scully
Yeah.
has no patience. She shoots, but is very patient about shooting. Um, and yeah, it caught me by surprise. I knew that there was a part two of a Pusher, but I remembered nothing at all from the plot line. And so I like it when I'm watching something old that I've watched before, and I'm kind of like waiting, like, okay, what's the catch here? What's the catch? What's the catch? It's like, oh look, she's actually his sister and everything. She was a great villain.
She
Great.
was, yeah. And she could, I remember the takeaway from this is that after all these times they've had their guns pointed at each other and they still let themselves get manipulated into these situations. Mulder at the end kind of feels like he lost because he knew what he was up against, and he still fell for it, and he still almost killed Scully.
Yes. No, I did like that too. By the way, the title means the fox hunt in Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
So that's I'm sorry, that's one of the references there. How was Modell tried and convicted in 1996 if he only woke up 6 months ago? 6 months before this episode would have been at least mid 1997. He can be tried in absentia if circumstances require it. In this case, they had no way of knowing when he'd wake up. So there's a little bit of a geek note right there. But yeah, I dug it too. I gave it 4 stars, and yeah, I called it a pretty good Fox Hunt episode. Uh,
Yeah.
because it really was more centered on trying to find this guy. He was always one step ahead, and so was his sister, obviously. And I liked that there were so many twists and turns in this 40 minutes. It doesn't, it seems like there's more than 40 minutes to some of these great episodes, man. That's one thing that I've been noticing about the X Files since, the beginning, is how much they pack in 45 minutes, let's say. Um, it feels like it's an hour or more, of content because of the pacing is so good and the characters are so well written. So I love it. I love this episode. I don't know if it's going to be in my top 10 of the season because there were a lot of good episodes this season.
It wasn't as
But
good as the first episode, but it
no,
was good.
yeah, yes, I definitely agree with. But it's a good 4-star episode. And then from there, we are going to move on to episode 9, which is called. Good Lord, X Files and their weird titles. Wait, I gotta look at it to remember. What's it? Schizo Jenny? Something like that. Schizogeny?
I
Schizogeny?
believe so, yes.
Now this is a weird
Let me
episode.
just take a look here. Yeah, Schizogeny.
Okay, yes. And this aired on January 11th, 1998, and to 21.37 million viewers. So this is ratings wise, hell of a season for the X Files because it was leading up to the movie too. So people were just watching every damn week. They were really into this show at this time here, and written by Jessica Scott and Mike Wolliger. By the way, I've noticed a lot of new names, in the writing, especially in season 6. There's this guy that keeps showing up, but I don't know his name off the top of my head. But kind of cool that they're getting these new talents and new ideas. And I think that it changed a lot about the show, too, the tone especially. But a lot of weird stories. Like, they went very bonkers.
This
Especially
one
after
was out there.
Yes. So Mulder and Scully investigate a case involving the deaths of several fathers who seem to have been murdered by their son or daughter, but the agents learn that the real killer may in fact have been an ability to control nature itself. Yes, so it starts out, you get this kind of Eddie Furlong-ish character, if anybody was a fan of Terminator 2, just kind of loser boy, just kind of doing, trying to stay out of trouble, but always seems to get into trouble. And his stepdad comes home, yells at him, tells him, I asked you to do stuff in the yard. You didn't do it right now. Boy runs away in anger. Dad chases after him, but then dad gets eaten up by the forest. And that's okay. And then you do get this guy with an axe, like that just pops out of nowhere. And that's what keeps happening. We're getting the woods keep killing these people, and his boy seems to be connected because he's always around when it happens, or somebody connected to him. Like there's this little girl that shows up. So we find out in the end, I thought it was going to be like another woods monster type episode like the one we reviewed last week. The Detour, was that last week that we reviewed that? Yeah, I thought it was going to be another one of those episodes, but the twist here is that actually the therapist, there's a lady that's a therapist, she's helping these kids. She is the one that's controlling the woods. She's almost like a Poison Ivy type character.
Yeah.
And she is putting ideas into these kids' heads about this trauma that they really didn't have because she suffered some trauma herself. And
right.
She's able to make the forest just kind of get revenge on the people that were what did they do? There was some bad stuff to her
no, she was abused by her dad. They find her dad's body.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, she got her dad's body in her basement. So it says here, Mulder discovered that Karen's father was pulled from the mud of an orchard 20 years earlier. He finds it strange that Karen failed to mention the coincidence. And Ramirez tells Mulder that Karen Matthews' father's death brought about an end of a blight affecting the trees. And Karen attributes the tale to her father's statue, believing powerful men inspire fantasy. But it ends up that he actually she was a victim. So X-Files talking about trauma, PTSD, and all of that in the X-Files way. I had fun with this episode. It wasn't great. I gave it 3 stars. Decent but murky. And I thought it built up well, but then the end was kind of predictable, with the weird guy out in the forest who kind of knew what was going on. And you kind of knew after he showed up twice and he wasn't a bad guy or anything that, okay, he's the guy that's going to save the day in the end. And he does by chopping the head off of the forest being, whatever the hell it is. Oh, the lady. He chops the lady's head off because she's the one that's controlling everything. So he chops her head off. And that was Actually, that was kind of a cool scene. It was nice to see somebody's head get chopped off, but it was really quick and predictable, and you kind of knew that, okay, this is where it's leading to. So I gave it 3 stars. It's decent, but a little murky. It's just one of those passable X-Files episodes that are better than most episodes of most series, but for X-Files standards, not like, you know, groundbreaking. What do you think of this one?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one thing you have to take into account here too, it was by rookie writers.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, like the core writers were taking the week off for this one, and so they just, they came up with something that could fit in anywhere, and it works like that. Um, I thought the villain was actually a really good metaphor for what was being revealed in the time, because actually in my hometown we had this really popular book written about us that made Victoria become known as like the Satanist capital of North America. Basically, there's this really famous book called Michelle Remembers that was like supposedly these memories that a therapist had coaxed from this girl about
Mm-hmm.
being abused by her parents and cult members and stuff. And it was actually investigated, and it all turned out to be bullshit. Like, there's no, I wouldn't say there's no Satanists in Victoria, but they're passive, happy Satanists. Like Anton First types. They're not like, murdering babies in graveyards and shit like that. So it was a good metaphor for how a lot of irresponsible therapists kind of project either their own guilt or their own desire for recognition onto their patients and manufacture trauma that isn't there. Um, One thing I liked about it as well is they do have some pretty good Mulder Scully back and forth in this one as well. Mulder is particularly good because Mulder being Mulder, he instantly accepts that it's killer trees. Scully plays the classic skeptic. She's like, nope, these people were killed by their kids. All the evidence leads to that. And Mulder is certain it's killer trees. Like he has no doubt. Most sane people would at least question it a bit, but no, it's killer trees. And there is actually a great scene where he climbs up a tree to get evidence, and he says to Scully, "Is this demonstration of boyish agility turning you on at all?"
Mm-hmm.
I like that they have that comfort level with each other by this point.
Yes. Um, I was looking back here and through the mostly the 80s, but through the 90s, there were a string of these very famous cases featuring charges against daycare centers.
Hmm.
Um, said perform, there were child abuse, satanic ritual, a whole lot of stuff. I clearly remember this because I was like 10, 11 or so when this was going on. And the X Files likes to borrow a lot from that, this idea of induced memories and false trauma,
Yeah,
um, and and then they'll add some paranormal stuff like that. That one with that substitute teacher, that's a classic, satanic ritual going on in the school stuff. So they were feeding into that hysteria, and eventually it died down. What is that noise? That happened before. Somebody calling you?
No, my secondary phone, something's gone off with the ringtone in terms of web browsers.
Oh,
It's weird. It doesn't Nobody's calling me. It's a Google Chrome notification, but I can't seem to shut down Google Chrome even when I turn off my phone.
oh, I got you. But look at that. Look how many. This is the timeline. Starting from 82, 83, 84, 84, 84. Look, there's a bunch, all through the 90s. Then we got 94, 96, 97, and then, it just stopped. And then in 2013, Dan and Frank Keller released from prison 4 years before being ruled innocent of the charges against them. So I like episodes like that because they're feeding into visceral American fears, and one of the most visceral is that your kids are not safe. Protect the children, this and that and the third, and so many wacky things happen based
Yeah,
on.
I don't think that's what they were trying to do here, though. I think that this was largely making fun of, well, not making fun, but saying, hey, like, a lot of these claims are bullshit.
No, but that's what I'm saying. That's what they're.
Yeah.
I'm saying the same thing. Is that the X Files? They're saying they're bullshit, but at the same time they're playing on the fears of Americans,
Right.
and that's the great American fear is that your kids are either gonna go into some sex ring, or they're gonna
Yeah.
become a communist, or they're gonna be termed gay if they will see two men holding hands or whatever. It's like, protect the fucking children at any cost, and we'll do whatever it takes, including some really shitty things that you can just go down the line in American history in order to protect the children. George Carlin, if anybody's a fan, actually has a great bit about protect the children and how everything went downhill during the 70s when they started that whole every child is special movement. And he says, clearly not every child is special. And some of them are actually assholes. uh, so I like this. I like when the X Files touches on these themes, even if this isn't like an amazing episode. But let's move one more ahead. Last episode here
Hmm.
called Chinga.
Chinga.
Yes, Chinga. Now, whenever I see little dolls, I get freaked out. I remember these movies when I was a kid. These porcelain dolls. There's a famous 70s. I think it's a Hammer horror movie with a bunch of porcelain dolls. It used to freak the shit out of me. Uh, uh, when I was a kid, freaked the shit out of me when I was a kid. So anyway, February 8th, 1998, we got 21.3 million people watching this episode, written by Chris Carter and Stephen King, and
Yes, this is the thing.
directed by Kim Manners. It's a 7.8 episode, 7.8 rating on IMDb. Scully tries to take a weekend vacation to Maine, but ends up investigating a strange case in which a seemingly murderous doll has apparently caused several victims to inflict wounds upon themselves. And there's some good and there's some bad in this episode.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah. Basically, I mean, this is the Stephen King episode, it had to happen. Stephen
Yes.
King was probably a fan. So of course, he probably wanted to write for it. They probably wanted to him to write for them. And for an X Files episode, it's decent. It's a decent filler Monster of the Week episode. But if you hold it to Stephen King standards, it's kind of, yeah, I expected more.
Hmm.
It's set in Maine, of course, because pretty much all of Stephen King's stories are set in Maine. And yeah, it starts in this grocery store where you got this young mother. As you can see in the image there, she's pretty young to have a kid that age. And she and her daughter go to the grocery store, and her daughter's carrying this creepy old doll Chinga with her. And everyone's looking at her. Everyone's looking at her really funny. And then her mother sees a vision of the store's butcher being killed. And as she tries to run out of the store, everyone goes nuts and claws their freaking eyes out. So
Hmm.
as it happens, Scully is just dropping into this grocery store in Maine because for no reason at all, she's in Maine on vacation. And she decides to give Mulder a call because this might actually be more his area of expertise. And as their investigation persists, It looks more and more like it is the Devil Doll, and I think this is what I didn't like about the Stephen King aspect, but also kind of fits him because like the evil doll thing, it's been so done. Like
Yes.
it's such a stereotype. But at the same time, that's kind of like if you ask Stephen King to just come up with something for a TV episode, that's probably the sort of thing he would come up with. Like, yeah, we'll make it an evil doll. We'll have fun with it. One of my favorite parts of this is when Scully phones Mulder for help, and Mulder suggests that she doesn't know what she's looking for. And she says, like evidence of conjury or the black arts or shamanism, divination, Wicca, or any kind of pagan or neo pagan practice, charms, cards, familiars, bloodstones, or hex signs, or any of the ritual tableau associated with the cult, Santeria, Voodooan, Macuamba, or any high or low magic. And he's like, marry me. So yeah, he's like, she knows that this is the guy to go to for this, and he's like so hot for the fact that she recognized that, and she's learning that these are the things to look for, and he's the go-to guy. So that was kind of an awesome scene.
I love that scene,
But
and also the scene in the what we got the gift there with him in the working very hard in his office, just throwing pencils up in the air. I think that's at the end of the episode, right, when
mhm.
she comes back. So good
Yeah,
character.
because he does the whole thing remotely. He's not actually at the crime scene. She's
Yep.
just calling him for advice. And then yeah, she comes back at the end and she's like, "So what did you do, while I was gone?" And all he's been doing is tossing pencils into the ceiling.
I got you. Yeah. I'm with you. Like it's okay. Like there were some really really good parts to it. In there
Yeah,
mostly.
the doll was scary. The doll actually was a scary fucking doll. So I mean, good for King. He knows what he's doing, like
Yeah,
scary
just come on
dolls
with the
never
dolls, yeah.
fail.
Yeah, I mean, look at Annabelle. I mean, those movies made millions, so and that's very recent. Still, kids get scared of dolls. Now, oh, somebody fighting outside. Anyway, Scully's on vacation, so she's got no time for Mulder. But the X Files finds her. I like that. The X Files always finds them. And some scenes that I liked that did work. Mulder watching what we think is porn in the office, but then it's the world's
Oh,
most
that was a
porn.
great scene. Yeah.
Yes.
because when he does say it's the world's deadliest swarms, and all you can hear is this is like,
Yeah.
oh man, they kind of ruined them. There never was any mystery, but I was like, that's a little too blatant for Mulder.
Yes.
And then he gets up and turns off the TV, and it actually is the world's deadliest
Yes.
swarms.
Um, yeah, and I said Killer Dolls, childhood fear, but kind of annoy me as an adult. I'm not gonna lie. Like I know you said the doll was scary, but I was kind of annoyed by the doll, only because again, why? It's just something that's so used, over and over and over and over and over. But it's the go-to that really works. I thought the acting was really crap. This is like very B level acting for the X
they
Files.
they had that B movie subplot with the love story between the mother and the cop,
Yeah,
which didn't add anything to the story
yeah,
really at
it was
all.
really bad. It was kind of cool. It was kind of a reverse roles in terms of like, remember that macrophage episode, with the cockroaches,
Right.
where Scully was the one, kind of, Mulder was calling her for advice, but she eventually made it down there. But in this case, she's the one that's calling Mulder. And the Hokey Pokey and I Want to Play got old really fast. I want to play. Oh fuck this.
Yeah.
um, And the end, where Scully's trying to get in the house, is just breaking the door and rip the doll from her. And I thought it was a weird episode. Didn't quite do it for me. Tried to do a few new things at least. I did like Mark Snow doing a little hokey pokey on the piano as far as the score. And Scully can't tell Mulder she got out of her own head, and Mulder does nothing without her, you know. So, what is interesting is as much as these two characters really respect each other, they still try to put on this fake act, like because we're seeing more and more that Scully is opening up to the paranormal. This is a great episode for that, by the way. That's one thing it does that I do like about it, because whether she wants to believe it or not, she realizes something's going on with this doll. So she puts it in the burner, and then boom, she's able to save the day. And yet she can't really admit this to Mulder. Like she's not going to go to Mulder and say, "Look, I encountered a magic doll that was killing people," and Mulder can't really admit that without Scully there, he's really unmotivated. He's just going to throw pencils up at the ceiling. So I like that. And that brings me to something that I was reading here in the wiki page is that um, one, Chris Carter and Stephen King did not meet during the writing of this episode. Stephen King submitted several drafts, although
Yeah,
the interaction between Mulder and Scully was considered to be slightly out of character in each revision. So Chris Carter is the one that had to deliver the final draft and get that stuff to work. And it's the best stuff about the episode or the
yeah,
Mulder and Scully episodes.
yeah.
Um,
That's totally understandable too. Like he probably wouldn't be if he could do the story, but probably not really used to writing those particular characters. So when
yes,
it says written by Chris Carter and Stephen King, you can totally see like who contributed what. Scary Doll, Maine, Stephen King. Mulder and Scully, Carter.
yes. And we also find out in this episode where Mulder got the "I Want to Believe" poster at some head shop on M Street 5 years earlier,
Hmm.
which is kind of cool. The book on Scully's nightstand in her motel room is titled "Affirmation for Women Who Do Too Much" by Adriana Carrillo. But Stephen King first expressed interest when he was on an episode of Jeopardy with David Duchovny. So he's been wanting to write. He had been wanting to write for the X Files for some time. And I can imagine, Stephen King being a fan of the X Files because he loves horror. I
Yeah.
got into a bit of a Stephen King phase last year or 2 years ago, and I was watching a lot of his talks at colleges and universities. And he's such a cool dude as far as how much love he gives to other writers and other, especially other horror writers.
I read pretty
Very
much
generous.
anything he recommends.
Yeah, he's very generous in that way. So I could definitely see him hanging out in his home watching the X Files every week, just like the rest of us. The king of horror himself. So that wraps it up, guys. For the X Files, season 5, episodes 6 through 10. Hopefully, next week we'll be on and we'll get through episodes 11 through 15. But let's go back now because Pete made a great suggestion just to run through all 10 episodes here in our watch in skip mode. So let's see here. Episode chronology. How come it's not working for me? The X Files. Wait up, Pete. I'm not being able to. Oh, there it goes. Season 5 episodes. So we got ourselves. Fuck, man. 1 second, Pete. I'm trying to get the Xbox season 5. Give me the episodes in order. There they are. Okay. So Redux. Scully helps Mulder to fake his own death in an effort to discover which members of the FBI she can take down. Skip or watch?
You got to watch it because it's like all season premieres. It resolves the not really cliffhanger of season 4, but it's an important mythology episode and it completely sets the tone for this season. So, yes, definitely a watch.
Yeah, I agree with you. Not my favorite episode, but it just sets the table and it brings you right into the movie too. And what about Redux 2? I guess same,
Yeah,
right?
of course, you can't take one without the other, right?
Yep. It's a little bit better too. I think I like part two better than part one. Unusual suspects. For those that remember, we got two salesmen and a federal employee join forces when they meet Suzanne Modeski. This is the flashback episode to tell us how the lone gunmen were created and how Mulder essentially was created.
Yes, and maybe maybe Mulder just got too much gas back in the day, and that's why he's the way he is.
Exactly, because it's been pretty right before then. But anyway,
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to say watch. It's not essential viewing. You could skip this one and still follow the overall story because it's not considered a mythology episode, even though it's an origin episode. But I think it's just one of those like unusual standalone episodes that you would enjoy as a fan of the show. I would say not for a first time watcher or a newbie for sure, but if you're a fan, yeah, this is one you kind of got to watch.
yeah, I put this one in the same category as the musings of the cigarette smoking man. If you're not a fan, it's not gonna be funny. It's not gonna be interesting even. Because if you're a fan, you know these characters already, so that's what makes it funny to see Mulder walk in with that kind of early '90s, late '80s hairdo and all,
Yeah,
like the very by the book cop still or agent still, and then because you know what he became, so that's what makes it funny to see him just be the opposite of that. And you got our boy Richard Belzer, right? Is that how we say his name
yes,
wrong?
yes, it's a
Yes.
crossover with Homicide.
Exactly. Yeah, I always want to say Bowser because from Mario Brothers, that was the bad guy from Brothers. But yes, there's a lot of good stuff going on here. I say watch it, and then Detour.
Yeah, Detour. Last week I was gonna say skip, and I think I still am. But the only reason I'm saying skip is I was like, God damn it, I can't say watch everything. Like this is such a good 5 episode batch. And there are things that I liked about this episode, especially like the idea of Mulder and Scully being sent on a team building retreat with two total keeners, and Mulder just like dying to get out of it. That's the detour where they find these forest monsters. But ultimately, I'm still going to say skip because I think my big criticism of this was it was really derivative of a lot of popular movies at the time, like Aliens and Predator and that.
Hmm.
The unseen monsters stalking you in the forest. So
Yeah,
I'm going to say it's a good episode, and it had a lot of things I liked about it. But ultimately, if you're going to pick one skip from this batch, it's this one.
yeah, and I remember you had said that it was derivative of other like outside media, and I didn't even think of that because I was thinking I was very derivative of the X Files. You know, there's they've gone over this
They
ground
have,
times.
they
Uh,
have, but more originally.
Yes, exactly. So that's what stood out to me. I didn't even get to the outside media part of it. So it's cool that you brought that up. But yet I say watch it because it's fun enough to watch, and you get young Stamets if you're a fan of Star Trek Discovery. I always forget his name now. Michael Rapp or not Michael Rapp. Shit, I forgot his name. But anyway, he's in there, which is really cool. And and the effects are cool. I think the monster is kind of freaky, kind of the way he's hiding out in the forest, kind of camouflaged. And it starts what becomes for me the main crux of this season, as far as Scully arc, is her not being able to deny it anymore. Like there's paranormal
Right.
shit out there. Like she has to just I saw it. I've seen it. I saw it. I don't know how to explain. There's got to be a scientific explanation for this. That's all she can say at the end. So important for those reasons. So I say watch. And then to close out this first batch of episodes, we did the postmodern Prometheus. And what do you think about that?
Oh, it's a classic. And it's a game changer too. Like I'm halfway through season 6 now, and they took a lot of things from this episode and did episodes like this in season 6 where it's like we're going full on today, boys. We're just going right off the rails. We're making a compartmentalized episode that, for all anyone knows, doesn't actually really happen. It's just something fun we're going to do with these characters. And yeah, it was just so different and so important to the direction that the show took when they really couldn't sustain the mythology. They still had this to fall back on. And some people think that's a negative thing, but I don't know. I really like some of these episodes, and I think this is pretty much ground zero for that.
I'm with you, and I'm sure we're going to get into that conversation when we get into season 6, where a lot of people feel like the X-Files, really, the X-Files is seasons 1 through 5, and then it's like, and then it's whatever after. But I'm with you. I tend to like when they went outside of the X-Files and said, let's just make this into the outer limits. Let's just make this into the Twilight Zone. Let's just make this into whatever wild, crazy thing comes into our mind. It just happens to have Mulder and Scully as the central pieces of it. And this would be the ground zero. I mean, maybe you could...
filmed in black and white, the soundtrack,
yeah, filmed in black and white.
the lightning...
You can make an argument for Jose Chung, though. You can make an argument for Chung. But I think this one, like, that was like just the sprinkling, and this one is just like, okay, we're going 100%. We're going all in. Even the end where he breaks the third wall, or the fourth wall, sorry. And he's, because they couldn't save the guy. They couldn't break the case. They were going to, little monster dude was going to go to jail. And Mulder's like, where's the writer? Where's the writer? Like, and it's so beautifully done. And then, yes, we fade to black, and all of a sudden we're going to a Cher concert. Oh, and I was reading on the wiki page. I didn't realize, not on the wiki page. It was an article that came out where Chris Carter was talking about this episode, and that whole scene was improv. He didn't, it was, because he was really stressed out. He had hired a bunch of locals. He said that the fat boy that was, I guess, the spawn of a pig and his mom, the guy that was writing the great comic books, he was being a complete jerk. He couldn't control any of these people. They were just stressed out. So Chris Carter was just like, just play the music, the Cher impersonator, just do it. Just do whatever. And Jillian and David just naturally got up and danced.
Yeah, I know. It's a great scene. And it worked so well, too, the way they free shot that and turned it into a comic book panel. That was wonderful.
Very cool. Yeah, and I always thought that was scripted, and it was so cool to read that and actually Chris Carter said it was the opposite feeling that he had, because he's like, we were so careful. We were trying to be so careful not to have anything that gives these two characters any type of intimacy, like romantic intimacy. Yeah. So that's 100% not what I wanted to do. But when I look back on it, I'm like, wow, like that's exactly what the episode needed. Like it just showed the true love between not just Fox and Scully, but David and Jillian, who even to this day are really good friends, and they had some rocky moments. But it was really, really perfect. So probably is going to be, no spoiler. It'll be in the maybe top 3 for the season for me, this episode. But then we get to Christmas Carol.
Yeah, Skip.
I'm with you. Not much to see here. Not the worst. Like I said, I've really shitted on a lot of mythology episodes of late because they've been so redundant, and it just really felt like, okay, we're just kind of dragging this along because the movie's coming. I've said this a couple times on the podcast that Chris wanted the movie to be after season 4, and Fox said, no, we want another season. So he kind of had to drag stuff. So it's better than some of those draggy mythologies, but it's still like what you said, nothing to see here, folks. Nothing to see.
I've noticed that this happens a lot. Like the more writers you have on an episode, the more like it was just pulled out of somebody's ass. This one is like Vince Gilligan, John Shaban, and Frank Spotnet. So you got like three writers on both episodes. That's a clear indication that they were having difficulty coming up with something. And two different directors too. Usually the two-parters have the same directors.
Yes, yes. And speaking of, as Pete usually says, if you watch one, you got to watch the other. I think in this case, if you don't watch one, you don't need to see the
Yeah,
other. So I say skip for Emily too.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. You can pass on Emily.
yes. Now we get to Kitsu. Oh, sorry, Kitsu Nagari, the fox hunt.
Hmm.
Skip or watch?
Definitely watch. It's he's one of those. Modell is one of he does die. I don't think we actually mentioned that, but Modell does actually come to his end in this one, and he was only in two episodes, but he's such a powerful character that everybody remembers, and it's a cool way. Well, I mean, it's kind of rehashing what I said already in the podcast, but it's a cool way they brought him back by not having him be like the main villain. So it was a return of a monster of the week that was done in a pretty original way, I thought.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
But
For me,
you gotta watch Pusher for this to have any context.
yes, this one requires a little digging back to season 4. And then we got schizogeny, or schizogeny, I don't know how to pronounce that.
I
Um,
believe it's schizogeny.
yeah, sounds better, right? Schizogeny. Mulder and Scully investigate a case involving death of several fathers. And what's going on with this? Skip or watch?
I would say skip. It is that the X Files have a lot of episodes like this that were written by like freshman writers, which this one was, where they kind of did their best, but that's what it feels like. It's like, hey, we're new here. This is what we came up with. It's not bad, but it's not exactly required viewing.
Um, yeah, and I'm with you. Like, although I liked it, it just kind of retreads a lot of stuff. And we just had an episode in the woods with what seems to be like the forest attacking people. And then we get this one, so it's like almost back to back, Detour in Schizogeny. And although both of them don't really blow you out of the park, like, woo, wow, look at that, they're solid enough. But if I'm going to pick one of these two that are very similar in tone, I guess in some ways, I'm going with Detour because at least it's funny and there's some great Mulder and Scully moments in it, with just them two talking to each other and trying to stay alive out in the woods. And then we got Chinga, which kind of reminds me of the Chia Pet. But go ahead.
Yeah, we just talked about this episode, and neither of us really gave it rave reviews, but I'm gonna say watch simply because it is a Stephen King scripted episode. It's got his fingerprints all over it. If you are a fan of Stephen King, which I am, I've read pretty much everything he wrote between 1975 and 1993, and then I've been more selective about his work since then. But he is definitely a writer that I've enjoyed since I was like 12 years old. And I know a lot of people feel the same way. Stephen King is, even though they don't read the books, even though they watch movies based on his books, like he's been the fabric of the part of a lot of people's lives, especially horror fans. So if you want to see a marriage of Stephen King and the X Files, which I was pretty stoked about at the time, then yeah, this is worth checking out. It's not the greatest, but this is your only chance to see the X Files Stephen King team up. And it was not disappointing. It was just not all it could have been, but it was good enough.
Yeah. Well, I say skip it. Not the greatest episode for me. I think that the most important part of it is Just more of the Scully developing this, letting her paranormal muscle work a little bit more, which is kind of cool because, as we all know, eventually Mulder leaves, or the Coveney leaves the series, so she does have to carry the series. So it's cool to see these early episodes where she's taking the lead and she's opening her mind up a little bit, because that's going to be a really important piece of the show in just a few years from now, if we're looking at the original show timeline. But just not enough for me to recommend it as a watch. And that's all, folks. Oh, look at that. We have somebody on and I didn't even notice. What's good, fellas? So are you all really reviewing the X-Files? Are you all big fans of the show? Well, I'll write a message. He's probably gone by now. Uh, well, no, I'm just saying. Sorry, dude. Usually we don't have live people watching. People watch on the replay, so didn't see your message. And yes, we are huge fans of the X-Files and of media in general. And Pete, we got to do some Brazilian movie stuff. I think that's going to be real great for the podcast. I know a bunch of
Yeah,
people.
that's a difficult one though, because it's really hard to find Brazilian movies with English subtitles.
I got the hookup for you. Don't worry, I'll get you the
All
hookup.
right, because
The really good
I
ones.
I swear I've seen like, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 Brazilian movies with English subtitles.
No, I can find you ones, because I usually watch them with English subtitles. Because when you start getting into those movies set in the Northeast and all of that, you need sometimes subtitles. Actually, there's a very funny movie that's on that list where it's set in the Northeast and it's got captions. Like, part of the joke is that it's got captions for Brazilians. Like, it's written in Portuguese at the bottom because the accent is so hard. It's almost like us watching a movie from like northern Scotland or something, and we're like, okay.
Oh, like that movie where they subtitled Brad Pitt, where he played a pikey.
Oh yes,
It's like a Guy Ritchie movie. I think it
yes.
was Snatch.
What's the
I'm
fuck
not
was that
sure.
movie called?
I think it's Snatch, or it might have been Lock, Stock, and 4 Smoking Barrels.
Exactly.
But I know it was a Guy Ritchie movie.
Yes, no, it's Snatch, I think. And yes, so it's kind of a joke like that, where they got to put the captions on for just Brazilians. So I find a lot of these movies with subtitles. Actually, a really good one I found. My friend Pedro found for me with subtitles. So I'll send that over to you. That's a really funny movie. Anyway, so yeah, for those that don't know, we do X-Files reviews, and I believe after we're done with the X-Files, we're going to move on to Deep Space Nine, which should be really fun. Are you still up for that one? Because
I am. It depends on what I'm doing. Life is chaos at the moment.
Yes. Cool. Well, guys, thank you for hanging out with us for the hour. We will be back hopefully next week and review some more X-Files. Keep on watching. Truth is out there. And like and
Cheers.
subscribe.